All right. What are we going to do in this episode of the talks? Here we'll be trying to simplify you what exactly strategy is, what is the importance it creates, what is the importance of strategic goals, what is it in simple terms, and last but not the least, what exactly is strategy formulation. So within this 10 minutes, we will try to wrap a very important concept which will definitely add you value to it, and you will be able to understand how exactly the strategy works. We always talk about strategy, and the word business strategy is a very commonly used word. But what exactly is strategy? How do we do it? How do we form a strategy? The first important thing of a business strategy is the concept of strategic planning. Now, very tough word you're using. What exactly is strategic plan? Let me first give you a very simple example, in a simple way to explain. Strategic planning is the ongoing organizational process of using available knowledge. So whatever knowledge you have, based on that. Now, this is what you do. When why do you do it? To document a business's intended direction. So if we say strategic planning is the ongoing organizational process, the word ongoing is very important, of using available knowledge to document a business intended direction. Three very important part of over here: ongoing organizational process, using available knowledge for doing what? A business intended direction. Now, why do we do this? This process is basically to prioritize efforts, effectively allocate resources, align the shareholders and employees on goal, and ensure these goals are backed by data and sound reasoning. And that's why over here you see on the top of the strategic planning, and based on that there are certain levers and enablers which helps it. That is data. You need to understand whether you're creating a value or not, value creation, aligning the stakeholders and also the employees to that planning what you have. Third thing is whatever you are doing, whatever strategy you're formulating, it needs to have a reasoning. It's a very important thing which we need to understand. We need to understand that when we are doing a strategy formation, the planning stage, we need to take into account all this factor, and this in one word helps you to have a strategic formation. So before diving into the specific of crafting a business strategy, it is important to understand what are the strategic planning process is and how it can benefit your organization or your startup. And that is the reason why we define why exactly strategic planning is. Now, how does it add a value? We will be talking about this in the next slide. Now, as you understand, strategic planning requires time, effort, and continual reassessment. Given the proper attention, it can set your business on the right track. Now, you can ask me what exactly this strategic planning help. Why do we do the strategic planning? Now, this helps you to create one forward focused vision, one vision. One significant benefit of strategic planning is that it creates a single forward focused vision that aligns your company's employees and shareholders. By making everyone aware of your company's goals, how and why you chose those goals, and what they can do to help reach them, you can create an increased sense of responsibility throughout your organization. This can also have trickle down effects. For instance, if a manager isn't clear on your organization's strategy or the reasoning used to craft it, they could make decisions that counteract it. With one vision to unite around, everyone at your organization can act with a broader strategy in mind. Now, the next point: attention to details. Strategic planning helps you to draw attention to biases and flaws in reasoning. The decisions you make come with inherent bias. Taking part in the strategic planning process forces you to examine and explain why you are making each decision and back it up with data, projections, or case studies, thus combating your cognitive bias. Now, when you tell me what is this cognitive bias? So let me give you certain example to make you understand what basically cognitive bias is. One of the cognitive bias is the recency effect. What is this recency effect? It is a tendency to select the option presented most recently because it's fresh in your mind. Another bias which we talk about is Occam's razor bias. What is this? It's a tendency to assume the most obvious decision to be the best decision. There's also different kind of biases like inertia bias, which we can explain as the tendency to select options that allow you to think, feel, and act in familiar ways. Another type of bias we can talk about confirmation bias, the tendency to only pay attention to information that supports your viewpoint. If you're crafting a strategic plan for your organization and know which strategy you prefer, enlist others with differing views and opinions to help look for information that either proves or disapproves your idea. Combating bias in strategic decision making requires effort and dedication from your entire team and can make your organization strategy that much stronger. Now, another thing which is very important is when you do a planning, your strategic planning, it helps you to track progress based on strategic goals. That is, having a strategic plan in place enables you to track progress towards your goals. You have certain goals. If you just set the goals and but you don't plan for it, it doesn't help. So when each department and team understands your company's larger strategy, their progress can directly impact its success, creating a top down approach to tracking key performance indicators, which we define as the KPIs. By planning your company's strategy and defining its goals, you can determine KPIs at the organizational level. Those goals can then be extended to business units, departments, teams, and individuals. This ensures every level of your organization is aligned and can positively impact your business KPIs and performance. Remember one thing, although your strategy might be far reaching and structured, it must remain agile. A business strategy needs to evolve with the challenges and opportunities it encounters. Be prepared to pivot your KPIs as goals shift and communicate reasons for change to your organization. To craft a strategic plan for your organization and reap those benefits, you first need to determine the goals you're trying to reach. It is very, very important. One of the another important thing which we will be talking over here is what exactly we are doing. When we talk about planning and all those things, we talked about the word goals, what exactly we're trying to do. That we will be discussing in the next slide. In this earlier part, when we are talking about strategic planning, we used a lot of time the word goals. What exactly is our strategic goal? In an ever changing business world, it is imperative to have strategic goals and plan to guide organizational effort. Yet, crafting strategic goal can be a daunting task. How do you decide which goals are vital to your company, your startup? Which are actionable and measurable? Which do you prioritize? To help answer this question, here's a breakdown of what characteristics, or rather, what defines strong strategic goals and how to select which to pursue. Now, when we talk about goals, the most important thing is the purpose. Every goal needs to be purpose driven. A strong strategic goal is driven by purpose. Why, what are you striving for, and why is it important to set objective? What impact do you hope to have on profit, your community, and the environment? Develop and select the goals that are guided by the answers to this question. You don't have to leave your values at the door when you come to work. Adopting a purpose will not hurt your performance if you do it authentically and well. If you're able to like your purpose to a strategic vision of the company in a way that really gets people aligned and facing in the right direction, then you have the possibility of outperforming your competitors. Now, when you set a goals, it is very important to set long term. When setting strategic goals, think of your company's values and long term vision and ensure you are not confusing strategic goals with operational goals. It's very important to understand what exactly you mean by strategic goal and what you mean by operational goal. While strategic goals are your organizational long-term objective, operational goals are the daily milestone you need to reach to achieve them. For instance, your organizational goals could be to create a new marketing strategy. However, this is an operational goal in service of a long-term vision. In this case, the strategic goal could be breaking into a new market segment to which the creation of new marketing strategy would contribute. Keeping a forward-focused vision to ensure you're setting challenging objective that can have a lasting impact on your company. So it's very important to distinguish what basically are your strategic goals and your operational goals. Next, the most important thing, the strategic goals should be actionable. Strategic goals aren't only long term and forward focused, they're actionable. If they aren't operational goals, your team can't complete to reach the strategic goal. The organization is better off spending time and resources elsewhere. When formulating strategic goals, think about the operations goals that fall under them. Are there actionable steps your team can take to achieve your organization objective? If so, the goal could be worthwhile endeavor. Now, the very important thing one of the people person say is if you can't measure something, you cannot define it. When crafting so measurable is a very important characteristics of a goal. When crafting strategic goals, define how progress and success will be measured. For instance, the goal became a, the goal maybe your goal can be to become a, just like Google name for search, rather a became a search the common verb, because you need to become a verb. Consider the intended time frame to reach this goal and how you will operationally define and achieve what you really want to achieve. The method of obtaining data must also be taken into account. We are right now in such a phase, we have access to a lots of data, but the problem is we don't utilize those data, we don't slice and dice them and try to get the insights from them so that we can develop a measurable goals. So this is very important. Now, one of the important thing which we need to understand that when we talk about goals and all those things, we need to understand at the base of every business is your value creation. You need to understand value creation is very important. You need to align your goals with all the members, all the employees. It has to be a top-down effect. You need to understand, you need to give the reasons of why is that goals are there. And in the end, this will help you to formulate your strategy, which is very important. Now, once you have identified several strategic goals, determine which are worth pursuing. Because understand, whenever we have certain good of options and certain things, we need to understand which goals are really required. To set the stage, ensure everyone is aware of the purpose behind each goal. This calls back to the Henderson's points that employees' alignment on purpose can set your organization up to outperform its competitors. Now, but how do we assess? As we just mentioned before, you need certain tangible outputs or something measurable to assess it. One of the widely used matrix is calculation of anticipated ROI. What do we mean by ROI? It is basically the return of investment of the operational goals tied to each strategic objective that can provide an usual estimate for decision making. For example, if your strategic goal is to reach a particular revenue by 2030, you need to break that down into actionable subtasks such as how much we need to produce each year, how much revenue we need to do, and how we can craft a marketing and public relationship strategy and calculate the expected cost and return for each. So, if I try to give a mathematical formula to it, the ROI formula is typically written as return on investment is equal to net profit by the cost of investment. It's a percentage, it's expressed in percentage, and so it's multiplied by 100. In project management perspective, the formula, it's a little bit different. How do we say return on investment from a project management perspective? It is basically the financial value minus the project cost divided by the project cost into 100. An estimate can be a valuable piece of information when deciding which goals to pursue, although not all strategic goals need to yield a high return on investment. It's in your best interest to calculate each objective's anticipated return on investment so you can compare them. Another important thing, which more from a qualitative perspective we say, is considering the current events. When deciding which strategic goals to prioritize, you cannot overlook the importance of the present moment. It cannot happen. Just take an example of Nokia. When they were setting their strategic goals, they didn't understand that was a time to assess the current event. What's happening in the world could impact the timelines of each goal. For example, in 2020, the COVID 19 pandemic and the ever intensified climate change crisis impacted many organizations' strategic goals. Often, the goals that are timely and pressing are those that earn priority. So, after determining your organizational prioritized goals, you can begin formulating a strategy to reach them. The next section will outline several factors to consider when crafting a business strategy. Successful strategy can set your organization or your startup on the right track for years to come, but creating one is often easier said than done. According to a survey, just 68% of professionals believe their organization is good at developing strategy, down from 80% in 2012. Here we will be talking about five different factors to consider for successful strategy formulation. The first, starting with purpose. When setting out to create a winning strategy, the first question to ask yourself is, what's my organizational purpose? It's very important to discuss the importance of starting with purpose when building your business strategy. Those leaders and firms who are driving real change and often reaping the benefits of being first movers are motivated as often by the driving desire to make a difference as they are to make money. Instead of jumping into other things, other big pictures, you should try to put your value and mission of producing sustainable business at the center of its strategy development, enabling it to take steps to reach that vision. Understand there's an intersection of doing good and doing well, often referred to as the process of creating shared value. This process of creating shared value has a potential to be a highly lucrative space. Now, one of the strategy which we'll be talking about is a formulation framework. One of the formulation framework we'll be talking about is a triple bottom line. What is this triple bottom line? The triple bottom line is a business concept that posits firm should commit to measuring the social and environmental impact in addition to their financial performance, rather than solely focusing on generating profit or the standard bottom line. It can be broken down into three P's: profit, people, and planet. What do we mean by profit? Profit refers, as you all know, refers to a financial return a company generates for its shareholders, or I would say for its shareholders and other stakeholders. People refers to a company's commitment to making a societal impact in communities locally and abroad. Planet, it refers to the impact an organization makes on the environment. Now, this is one of the framework. Another framework which you should consider is considering the global events. Business doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's influenced by politics, policies, laws, and relationships between countries, because those relationships can be extremely nuanced. It's important to closely follow news related to countries where you do business and consider global events as you formulate a strategy. Political leaders' decision can impact taxes, labor laws, raw material costs, transportation infrastructure, and education system. It's both exciting and intimidating that the nuances of international politics, policies, and relation can impact your business. Stay informed and incorporate new knowledge into your strategic planning process as it rises. Now, another important thing when you need to consider is you should consider use cases, case data. You should examine the data and the trends. In addition to current global events, a successful strategy must take into account the information and knowledge you have about your organization, other firms, and fundamental theories of economics. Understanding this information enables you to orient your company in the business landscape and learn from others' mistakes and successes. As you think about going out in the world and using these tools of experimentation, the first thing is to think of yourself as an experimenter. Change your mindset of what it actually means to look for data from the world that helps you know whether something works or doesn't work. When crafting a strategy, examine your organizational financial statements along with historical strategies that have been successful and unsuccessful. Also, analyze use cases or other business and economic principles that underline them. Now, these are in a broad ways various ways of understanding how we can formulate our strategy. So, hope this helps you. Then the next part we'll be talking about certain more concepts about it. But here, in details, if you talk about it, this is one of the things. Now, another thing what we need to do is setting effective communicative goals. You need to communicate your goals. As we speak right from the beginnings, selecting strategic goals is an important step of strategic formulation. Just as it is important to effectively communicate those goals to your organization. A research outlines that on average 95% of employees don't understand their company strategy. A staggering statistics considering that successful strategy execution requires organizational wide effort. Crafting a strategy is crucial, but it can't be successful unless it's effectively and artfully communicated to all employees so they feel empowered and responsible for reaching the company's goals. Now, another thing and the last point when we talk about strategy formulation, framework for strategy formulation, don't consider strategy as a one time process. Think of strategy as an ongoing process. Once you have formulated and communicated a strategic plan, it can be tempting to assume the strategic planning process is complete. But strategy is a continual process of development. In this era of disruptive strategy, 93% of those with successful strategies evolved and pivoted away from their original strategic plan. Most people think of strategy as an event, but that's not the way the world works. When we run into unanticipated opportunities and threats, we have to respond. Sometimes we respond successfully, sometimes we don't. But most strategies develop through this process. More often than not, the strategy that leads to a success emerges through a process that's at work 24 in 7 in almost every industry. So, periodically reassess your company's strategy to adapt to new challenges and opportunities and continue communicating its evolution to your broader organization. Now let's talk about certain words or start frameworks, formulation frameworks, which have been used uh, a lot of times when we are talking about formulation framework. One of this is the value stick approach. Now, what exactly is this value stick? So this value stick is closely related to the concept of value-based pricing. Now, what exactly is value-based pricing? Now, value-based pricing is a very new thing. So basically, value-based pricing is a means of price setting wherein a company primarily relies on its customers' perceived value of goods or services being sold, also known as customers' willingness to pay, to determine the price it will charge because it revolves around customers' priorities is occasionally called customer focused pricing. So value based pricing basically is called customer focused pricing. Now, When crafting a value based pricing strategy, one framework to keep on hand is the value stick. Now, what is this value stick? The value stick comprises four components. One, willingness to pay, price, cost, and willingness to sell. So I repeat, the value stick considers four components: willingness to pay, price, cost, and willingness to sell. When on the stick, each of these points falls, where on the stick each of this point falls determines how a sales value is split between a firm, its customers, and its suppliers. Now, if you try to understand, whenever you have the willingness to pay, it's basically higher the willingness to pay, the higher is the it depends a lot on the customer delight. Now, the price where you want to do defines your firm's margin. Now, the cost which has been developed is basically defines your supplier surplus. Now, understanding the relationship between the supplier, business, and customer, and how each entity gains value from your product is an important exercise during strategy formulation, because the whole value stick, or rather the value based pricing, depends on the concept of how much the cost it's been acquired, then based on that, what is the price that has been added, and based on that, what is the customer's willingness to pay, and also the willingness to sell. So it defines where on the stick each of these points really determines how a sales value is split between a firm, its customers, and its suppliers. Now, this is a very important concept which we discussed: value stick and value based pricing. Now, another concept which we wanted to understand is disruptive innovation. Now, disruptive innovation was a term coined long back. It's a process by which a smaller company, usually with fewer resources, moves upmarket and challenges larger established businesses. The process begins with a small company entering the low end of a market, or would say low end disruption, or creating a new market segment, new market disruption, and claiming the least profitable portion as its own. Because the established incumbent companies own the most profitable segments, they most likely won't fight the entrant for that market share. The entrant then improves its offerings and moves upmarket with increasing profitability. Once the incumbent customer have widely adopted the entrant's offering in the mainstream market, disruption has occurred. Understanding the disruptive innovation framework can empower you to create a strategy for disrupting an industry or avoiding disruption. So, one of the important thing on this times of uncertainty, and basically when everything is changing, is trying to inculcate the disruptive innovation as a formulation framework. To understand, the formulation of a strategy must constantly evolve, and so must your strategic skill set. So every time you need to understand what are the things changing, based on that unlearn, relearn, and upskill yourself, and that will help you to get the skill set for making a better strategic strategy for your organization for success.